Today, I want to start with the greatest mystery of all. How did we get here, and how did the world around us come to exist? This question can be rephrased as, how do you create something out of nothing? Some thinkers believe that the question of how do you create something out of nothing is simply the wrong question to ask. If we were to look at all the possibilities of how the universe originated, it can be viewed as a dartboard. And in the dartboard, the possibility of the universe starting with nothing is equivalent to a dart hitting the center of that dartboard. And we can say that the probability of it hitting somewhere else instead of at the center is much lower. So the chances are the universe just started off with something to begin with instead of nothing. I disagree with this analysis because anytime you're starting off with something, you have to explain how that something got there. And so the current theories of how we got where we are include the first theory, which is the divine intervention model. And what the divine intervention model states is that there was a divine intervention which started this universe from nothing to something, and that then that something keeps moving on like the world we see today. And that's, of course, the most prevalent theory in the human society today. A newer version of this divine intervention model, which is a more sciencey version, which states that some very advanced alien civilization generated a simulation, and what we are looking at is a simulation. And both theories are acceptable. There is no evidence to disprove either one of them. However, it doesn't answer the question of origin. And the reason it doesn't answer the question of origin is we're theorizing an entity which is more complex and more difficult to understand than the world we see around us. And so we're shifting the origin question from not being able to understand our current complex world to a question of not being able to understand how an even more complex entity came to exist. And so for that very reason, the question of origin is unanswered by the first model. The second model that is also commonly invoked is that the universe is a cyclical system and it always existed and it will always exist. And this theory has been around for centuries, especially in the Eastern religious thoughts. And the latest version of a cyclical universe model is the one proposed by Professor Roger Penrose, who suggested that after the continuous expansion of the universe, ultimately matter will disappear and only energy will be left. And at that state, we can consider it equivalent to the beginning of the Big Bang. And so then the process just repeats itself indefinitely. And so that's another version of the cyclical evolution model of the universe. That model, again, is acceptable. However, it's not answering the question of origin. And the reason is that even cyclical processes do have an origin. We can take the example of our lives. We're born, we have children, and then the children have their children. And this is a cyclical process which goes on for thousands of years. However, we recognize that we still have to explain how life came to exist on this planet, and it of course changed over time, but we still recognize that the question of origin of life is not answered by a cyclical process. We can take another example of a cyclical process, such as the Earth moving around the sun. And again, we've known that this process has been going on for billions of years. However, there was a beginning. There was a time when the Earth initially came to exist. And this process started billions of years ago, but still it had a beginning. So a cyclical universe process does not necessarily answer the question of origin. All my life, I believed in the scientific agnostic model of the origin of the universe, where we don't know how the universe got started, we don't know how the laws of physics came about, but once it got going, we have a very strong evidence in terms of how it has evolved over time. This question of how the universe originated was a question too complex for humans to answer, and I was satisfied with that. Ultimately, life goes on when we don't have answer to many mysteries of life. However, my thinking about the origin question changed when I learned about Tegmark's mathematical multiverse theory. In the next video, I will present the Logiverse paradigm.